So, Just to Kill, do you want to talk a bit, just sort of place us where we are in your career at this point?
I finished The Fury, and then I taught a course at Sarah Lawrence College where I showed kids how to make a low-budget feature, which became Home Movies. And somewhere in '79, I got the idea for Dress to Kill and wrote it on the dinner table in my apartment.
And you had started with Greetings and Hi Mom, which were whimsical, sort of Godardian, and then Sisters, and then Carrie. You sort of started to form this reputation in a genre that's sort of been associated with you through
The Hitchcock era.
Right, and a certain kind of thriller. And at this point, did you have a sense of like what people expected from a De Palma movie, a kind of horror thriller?
Well, I was still developing visual storytelling, so I, like Sisters and like Carrie, I started out with a kind of visual idea. And these ideas sort of, are rummaging around in my subconscious, and then they sort of come together in one story. And there were a combination of things that became Dress to Kill, because at one point I'd worked on a project called Cruising, which is finally made into a movie by Billy Friedkin. I liked the idea that a guy had gone undercover and he was trying to find a homosexual killer by pretending to be a homosexual and getting picked up cruising. And then the pickup at the museum idea from when I was in college, and I was an art history major, and we used to go to the museums and observe the paintings and, of course, the social interaction of guys picking up girls. So I had a kind of visual idea about that. Then there was the frustrated housewife and the psychiatrist who was born in the wrong body and is threatened by the fact that he's aroused by his patient, and he's making a male to female transition, and the fact that he becomes aroused brings out the murderer in him. Mm-hmm. At that point, on television, suddenly there were a lot of transsexuals being interviewed on these talk shows, and the Donahue show, I saw a guy that used to be in the armed forces that had a couple of kids, and then he felt that he was in the wrong body and was really a woman. But this concept of being in the wrong body, it's almost like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde idea, at least the way I was looking at it. So I had all these ideas sort of going around together. Then I had the science fair winner, myself, running around, the kid that's solving the crime. And I sort of had this image of him as myself when I was building these computers when I was in high school.
And the computer that he makes actually has the same name as...
Yes, exactly, the computer I made at the Philadelphia Science Fair.
And when you're writing the script and you have these sort of visual ideas and things that you want to include, did you know from the beginning that you were gonna knock off the main character?
Oh yeah. I always had the idea, like Psycho, to have the movie star get bumped off, 20, 30 minutes into the movie. It's a great idea.
Yeah.
Worked for Psycho. And I thought, well, how can I do that? And I was fortunate to meet Angie at a film festival in Montreal. So I had this image of her character, and then the audience getting involved in her particular dilemma and killing her 30, 40 minutes into the movie.
It's like the whole beginning of the movie, things that you start investing in, all of it is irrelevant to what the rest of the movie is.
Exactly. Rather large red herring.
Can you talk about maybe some of the elements that go into the museum sequence? Because on one hand, it's long takes, walks through.
It's very important when you go to a space to walk around it, take photographs, see what's unique about the space.
But leading up to it, it's a lot of little moments.
That's the whole way of building a sequence, using a very basic element of cinema, which is following a beautiful woman around. You can watch her walk, watch her look. And when you're in a museum, you got a lot of things to look at. You put a character in a position, and then you have them look in various ways, so the audience gets very acclimated to the geography of the location. Geography is very important when you're setting up a suspense sequence, because you got to know where things are relative to the principal, and then you have all these activities that are going on around you. If it's something I should be worried about, well, you have your character basically sitting in one position. Then slowly you start amping it up. Then the chess game can begin, but you've got to know the board.
Right.
And you got to know what the pieces can do, and you got to stay within that logic.
Something that I think it takes even maybe more than one viewing, because after she gets in the cab, you cut to the killer pulling the glove away.
Split screen.
Which, at least for me, experiencing it the first time, that's the first time I was aware that that character was there. But then when you watch the movie again, you actually see the character in the pan.
Yeah, when you do that pan.
Yeah,
yes.
and you see wandering.
Goes right by, the killer.
Maybe another thing also we should, in terms of the museum sequence, is sort of the use of sound and music as well, because you really isolate which sounds are pronounced, which are almost silent, and then when the music is, sort of takes over.
Well, it's like punctuation. You use very specific sounds. I mean, the problem today is there's so many soundtracks that everybody thinks you got to hear everything, but choosing the right sound to hear is almost choosing the right color to put on a canvas. What do you want the audience's ear to be drawn to? And you have to be extremely specific. I remember when we were mixing Sisters, and we had a lot of soundtracks going, and Bernard Herrmann said to me, "What do you want with those nickel and dime effects?" I mean, it's like they're getting in the way of the music, and what are they doing? Your sound editor usually puts all this stuff in, then you've got to sort of pull it out and very much focus the ear of the audience member as you would focus the eye of the audience member.
Also, it's another great Pino score. And
yes.
At that point, you had been working with him since Carrie, right?
Right.
It has a lot of emotion. For the thrilling parts, it's very intense. But there's also real, longing and sadness.
Well, it's also a lesson from Hitchcock. I mean, what would Psycho be without that score? I mean, the score is riveting, and it supplies so much of the tension and the anxiety and the paranoia. But you're quite right. You want to get into Angie's dilemma. Starting with the dream and the husband and the psychiatrist, the pickup in the museum, and finding out that the guy she slept with has a social disease, and forgetting her wedding ring, having to go back. I mean, it's just like, the worst day of your life. And the music, of course, evokes that. And composers like working with me because they give them a lot of space to write exactly the kind of emotional themes and the musical equivalents of what my characters are going through.
I feel like you've done several great subway scenes, but the Dress to Kill one is really terrific.
You've got to come up with a location that really digs into your worst psychological fears. Trains are always a fabulous location. Something about the confined space, you know, stuff going by in the windows. It's underground and it's dark. And plus you have the lights going on and off.
Right.
You know, so that all adds to the paranoia and scariness of the location. Plus it's all under bright light at the same time. It's not like that situation where you're always wondering, why do people go look for the monster when they don't turn on the lights? They're always going down with a flashlight or a candle. You're just like, why doesn't somebody just turn on the lights? But in the subway, everything's extremely well lit, and that brings a whole other type of horror.
Those sort of long sequences, they must take a lot of prep.
Well, it's all storyboarded. I mean, you know,
and the way you storyboard is, I mean, you just do your own drawings.
Yeah, they're these little sort of ridiculous, you know, little faces, and they're the little cards, and I paste them up on the wall and look at the movie. It looks rather complicated when it's actually done, but it's not as complicated to shoot as one might think.
I mean, you're sort of known for the bravura set pieces, but even in very simple scenes, like the scene with Keith and Angie when she's checking in on him and he's working on his science project, those scenes are very artfully choreographed, even though it's not as showy as, say, like the museum sequence.
What is this called, anyway? Well, to Peter, of course.
When I write scripts like this, you know, I'm working on one now where I have a very good idea, but then you've got to bring the characters into it, and you've got to bring the emotional story into it to hold the audience. You just can't have these, you know, visual, you know, arabesques to carry you through a movie.
But the challenge is to create blocking that makes it interesting, that doesn't call attention to
Exactly,
itself, you know?
Exactly correct. You place them in a way for the audience to look at them. So the technique does not get in the way of what they're trying to do. And you see, you know, great directors like William Wyler, when he's staging a scene, he basically, you know, just gets the camera in one position and lets the actors act through the emotion of the scene. And you can see the transference of feelings between them. You know, this idea of cutting to close-ups back and forth, I think shatters the sort of emotion going between the actors. You know, the whole idea of catching lightning in the bottle, something happens uniquely between the actors as they're playing a scene with each other, and it changes from take to take to take to take. That's why, you know, Wyler sometimes 50, 60 takes in order to get what he thought was right. It would drive some of the actors crazy. He said, just do it again, just do it again. Because something magical will happen that you never saw before. And it's like taking the actors another mile.
You could talk about working with Nancy again.
Well, I wrote the part for Nancy, and I wrote the part for Keith. These actors I'd worked with before. I was very aware of their abilities, and because of Nancy's and Keith's relationship in home movie, they had a terrific rapport with each other. And I, of course, played on that quite a lot throughout the movie.
That's her.
She must be his last appointment.
We gotta get a look in that book.
Yeah, I know. Marino wants it too, only I can get it for him faster. No legal red tape, just my ass.
All right, look, I'll get it. I mean, nobody cares about my ass, right? I'm just a grief-struck kid.
Yeah, but what a kid.
You've got to bring the characters to life and make the audience relate to them a little bit like human beings, and instead of just moving things around, you know, in some kind of spatial relationship for some kind of visual design. I mean, you got to make them real people.
And Caine working with
Well,
him.
Michael was just, he's a great actor to work with, and I was very fortunate because Sue Mengers, who was my agent at the time, represented him and suggested him, and I said, that's fantastic. I mean, Michael's a delight to work with. He's very witty, he's very bright.
He looks so great, and he's so classy and has such authority. I mean, when Angie first goes there, you feel like, oh, this is somebody who really is taking care of her.
Yes.
She's not taking care of
Absolutely.
at home. She's not. This is a real caretaker.
The whole idea of dressing up as a woman, he thought it was a great kind of joke, and he quite enjoyed it. But I think we only dressed him up once in the last scene when he gets shot. I'll never forget seeing him in that outfit. It was quite amusing.
Do you talk a bit about the reception to Dress to Kill?
Well, Dress to Kill, again, was very controversial because we were in the midst of the women's liberation movement. Violence against women had a very grotesque murder in it, and it got picketed. But it was successful. Somehow it transcended that. That was not the case with Body Double that came a few years later, because the company distributing it basically just pulled it out of the theaters because there was so much controversy about it. And now I was battling the ratings board on every one of these movies. But in these particular movies like Sisters or Dress to Kill or Blowout, I had a specific visual idea.
And these sort of visual ideas, which is like you were putting everything into it and yourself into these things.
I feel this is kind of a lost art. People don't think like this anymore, and it's becoming even more of a problem because the screens are getting small. The close-up and the two-shot is going to rule. We're not going to see too many David Lean shots on a, iPhone 6. They don't really work because you need the size of the screen. So I'm always thinking about the big screen. Hitchcock pioneered this stuff. And of course, he started making silent movies where you think visually all the time. And even though I am accused over and over again of imitating Hitchcock, I've always felt that I've taken the ideas of Hitchcock and tried to develop them further. That great visual idea and the way it's all carefully choreographed.